If there are free and fair elections in Venezuela in 2024, there are only two outcomes: a landslide victory or an obscene fraud. And in both events, we will be prepared to defend the will of the people of Venezuela. So this has turned not into an electoral political struggle or conquest. This is a spiritual fight between good and evil. And that goes beyond any ideological or political preference. They frequently tell me not to abandon them, that they follow me, that they will protect me. And once in a while, they even say, "Here comes my commander-in-chief." So they salute. So this is something that they do that, risking their positions or jobs. It for me is a thermometer of how things are doing within our armed forces and police corps. They've seen how our borders are compromised and our territory has given up to the guerrilla, to the narcotics, narco-trafficking groups, to foreign irregular terrorist groups. This movement goes beyond political parties and ideas. And this has brought us together because we want to be together again. We want our kids back. And that's, the goal and the strength and the force that move us towards the great victory that we will have next year, 2024.